Yes, they did. I will approve.
You move to approve?
Yes.
Can I have a second? The organizational issues are somewhat extensive today because two of our yeoman skill person members who have carried a lot of the burden of the work over the years since I joined are serving for their last meeting. Joan had a last-minute appointment put on her schedule. Joan had a last-minute meeting put on her schedule. She doesn't think she'll make it. She's going to try. And Kathy, who has done the great service of doing minutes for us, they're both finishing their second terms and therefore have compelled to rotate off, and we will definitely miss them. And that's one of the reasons, that's the main reason I brought cupcakes, but it's also cupcake time of year, so everybody help yourselves. That's number one. Number two is that next month, January, we do our reorganization meeting, so that will involve the election of officers. It always makes me, this is coming to the end of my second term, as the chairman, to run a non-secret ballot election from nomination through election feels a little bit tricky. I want to make a couple of comments along those lines. I asked Kevin to prepare and send out an email between now and the next meeting regarding what are the specifics and regulations around electing. They're pretty straightforward. You nominate people, you vote out loud, and then the gavel turns over if things turn over. So that's the process. From my own point of view, leadership development is a critical part of every organization. So is good leadership. And so I am more than happy to continue on for another year, but I would not say that if I thought that that was suppressing people who want to move up into leadership positions or move into leadership positions. And so I would heartily encourage anybody who has an interest, and we absolutely need to fill the role of vice chairman, which, if you're not sure, it's not the same job because one of the things is the responsibility for the minutes, but it is an opportunity to figure out what goes on and perhaps chair meetings when the chairman might not be available. So I would encourage people, if you're interested, when Kevin sends things out, prepare, and then at our next meeting we will have elections and install a slate of officers for the calendar year. We do our officers on the calendar year and essentially do our programmatic work on what's essentially the school year. And with that, we also will have the issue that people have been talking about over the last couple of with the two people rotating off. So the third person whose term is ending is Julie, but she's agreed to stay for another term, and it was the end of the first term. So we will have two vacancies on the board, and we're going to need to work to fill those. So I think that's it for organizational issues. Anybody else have anything to contribute there? With that, I have put the respiratory illness follow-up. I changed the title of that line from COVID follow-up to respiratory illness follow-up because we are seeing a very, 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 very busy season nationwide of visits to emergency rooms for flu-like illnesses, respiratory illnesses, hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and deaths. it's pretty tricky to try and to get good numbers on COVID is very, very tricky. To sort out COVID, RSV, and flu is very, very tricky. And I've really tried to get decent local COVID or flu numbers and have not been successful. But I did go to the CDC website to get their key points from their FluView site, and it's worth a minute. Seasonal flu influenza remains high, appears to be declining in some areas. So when we last spoke, it was on a very sharp ascent, and the question was it leveling off? There was a 2-week period, 1-week period where it leveled off, and then it started climbing again, but it looks like it may be leveling again. They're H3N2 and H1N1, and the vaccine is strong against it. There have been 9 pediatric deaths this week, 30 for the year. The estimates are that there have been at least 15 million influenza illnesses, 150,000 hospitalizations, and 9,300 deaths from flu. And if you consider that as over a 4-week period, those are very, very, very high hospitalization and fatality counts. And as we discussed over the years of the COVID, flu can be a very deadly illness, and it appears that this particular version is going to end up having a high case fatality rate. The cumulative hospitalization rate is higher than in week 49 than in every previous season for over a decade, although it did decrease in week 49 compared to week 48, and hopefully that represents we've seen the peak and it will move down. But none of the big 3 illnesses are behaving as they, quote, normally, unquote, would. Majority are again susceptible to the vaccine. All of them have been susceptible to seltamivir and peramivir, which are the Tamiflu and Ofluza. The CDC is recommending everybody eligible get flu vaccines, and that's about that for flu. RSV appears to have peaked. There are still a lot of sick kids. The number of adult cases appears to have peaked and declined. COVID is so hard to get a handle on, and one of the reasons is I think that nobody's interested in COVID. Nobody's interested in mitigation. People want it behind them, and it has changed dramatically. If you are in the middle of your life as a working individual, the risks of COVID are really actually very small if you are in any way inoculated, whether it's through infection or vaccination. But that is not true for people over 65. It remains a potentially very deadly disease for people over 65. And it is not true for the immune compromised or people with significant risk factors, so we are bifurcating. Influenza is an equal opportunity employer when it comes to infection. It actually is a higher rate of infection in younger decades, but with a substantially lower mortality rate. Mortality rates are extreme at the extremes of age, very youngest to very oldest. But with the degree, in some states and municipalities in this country, the healthcare system is overwhelmed now with the combination of all the respiratory illnesses. Although I don't think we're there yet, the informal survey I do is that the hospitals are very, 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 very busy with respiratory illnesses, including emergency rooms, floors, and ICUs. And that brings us, so what should people be doing? And the CDC experts, myself, when people are gathering, so old folks can take care of themselves, people can go to work, but when people are gathering, we're mixing generations, we're mixing geographies, and I don't think it is at all unreasonable to suggest that people who are getting together and gathering, especially with people who are traveling, take care, There is about a 24 to 36 hour window when you may be shedding influenza virus and be asymptomatic. So simply being symptomatic may not be enough. Be aware of that. Face touching should be avoided. Hand washing should be encouraged. And mask wearing became very controversial in the height of COVID. There is no doubt that wearing a well-fitting N95 is highly protective. It's even more protective of the person across the way. But for influenza, a good-fitting KN95 or N95 mask is probably pretty protective because the size of the droplets is significantly higher. So the combination of respiratory protection with a good mask, hand washing, and the other great advantage of wearing a mask in public where you don't know what you're going to be exposed to is it keeps your hands off your face. So don't rub your eyes, by the way. And I'm going to finish with that and see if anybody else has any comments on.
Yes, it does. And Maureen Lorario and Mr. Stitzel would be the two that would be really working with that, and our building administrators at all three of the elementary buildings.
Excellent, thanks. So we'll get an update from Bob in January, and hopefully in the spring we'll bring that program to its fruition. Then the other two points of old business actually belong to Joan. And Joan sent me an email, a protracted email, I might add. And the two projects are the animal health ordinances, which Maggie, I should have consulted with you before the meeting, but Joan says that she forwarded that to you, and that it is now in your hands. And so, can you?
Well, I never received it, so I can't say that she forwarded it to me. I did hear from our legal counsel, who she had initially forwarded it to, and he actually is tied a little bit because he can't do legal work by outside request. It has to come through the board. So I said, have her send it to me. And this was just last week. So I thought she was going to, but I have not received it. So if she sent it to me, it went to a different Maggie Myers, or can we just be sure she checks my email address? And that could either go to my personal email or to my township email. It doesn't matter.
So I'll take it as an action item to make sure that you get them, and then once you see them, then we can put together a
I
plan.
will email you that I've received them.
Excellent.
How about that?
So I'll take that on as an action
Yeah.
item.
And then I can talk to John and we can see if we can't push that toward, because I know she wanted some legal review of it. She had made lots of revisions, he said, so.
Good. Yeah, I actually saw, she really went over them with a fine-tooth comb, and there's no possibility I could make any meaningful contribution because it was all, certain current state-of-the-art regarding things like rabies exposure and so on that required the the learned eye of a veterinarian, but we'll figure out what, if there are issues, we'll figure out what to do with those issues, but I think she did a very thorough job of.
Well, we're really, thankful that she went over it so closely, and I will, as best I can.
Excellent. And then her other project was the road safety project, which I think that is back in the hands of public safety, and that she forwarded a relatively extensive list of places that she believed based on, busy roads with speed limits, with higher speed limits, roads that border borderways and green spaces, and any place where there's a high number of roadkill reports. And her list included Roberts Road, Church Road, Eagle Road, Ivan Avenue, South Devon Avenue, Brook Road, South Ithan along the creek side there after it makes the turn, I guess, along the park there, Godfrey, Fletcher Road, Upper Gulf Road, and Radnor Street Road, Darby Paoli Road, Sproul Road, Conestoga, King of Prussia, and Newtown. So I think it's in the hands of public safety now. There are two different kinds of signs being suggested, including the deer signs and the other wildlife signs. Joan also sent over a fairly extensive discussion of culling, which is coming up. I have to say that Joan and I diverge wildly on the issue of culling, and since culling is not a Board of Health issue, it is a public safety issue. And since, from my perspective, the Department of Public Safety has an excellent perspective on what needs to be done, both for the wildlife and for the residents of Radnor in terms of controlling deer population, which have no specific natural predator in Radnor Township and have had populations over 100 per square mile in my time in Radnor. I think that I don't think that it is a cause for the Board of Health to get involved in a program that seems to have been successful. So. With that, any questions, issues, concerns to raise on either of these two programs? And my intention is to close close the road safety out of our old business, and then hopefully close the animal health ordinances out of our old business, and hopefully we'll start working on some new old business items as we move into next year. So from there, the next on the agenda is student intern program follow-up, and I'll turn it over to Lisa to run that portion of the agenda, please.
Okay, so Khadijah's not here this evening. She had a death in her family, and actually I think she's perhaps already on break as well. So Ray's going to give us a little update about what they've been discussing, and basically, they had announced what their project was last meeting. Now they're going through, how they're planning to gather information and doing some literature review.
Yeah, so over the past month, we've been just getting most of our main goals down on paper, just like we've been following the SMART goals that you guys have been talking about a lot, just trying to figure out the ones that make sense to do, that are realistic. Especially I've been trying to figure out how to jump around with student surveys, since we can't do it through the actual school, since the school board probably won't allow that. But I've been talking to Lisa, and I'll probably make a Google Forms that has some important statistics or probably some important questions that would be helpful to get from certain groups of students. And then I'll send it out through different group meets I'm in, for different clubs or sports I'm in, to do some small scale student surveys. And on top of that, I've also created a general baseline schedule for the rest of the year, assuming that we will do the presentation in May. So currently we have through December, January, and February, we'll do just most of the preliminary research, creating a thesis, just gathering everything we need. And then along this time, I'm also gonna probably send out those forms to the students that I can. And then by hopefully March, we'll have most of the students' feedback back and most of the research done. And then by April, we can start constructing the presentation. And by May, it'll hopefully be ready to go.
Do you have a title?
A title for the project?
Yeah, sure.
Not yet.
All right.
I'm bad with titles.
Okay. What topic did you end up deciding to take on?
It was the topic of the distracted driving. I think mainly just
Perfect. So have you considered interviewing the people responsible for traffic safety in the township of Radnor?
I didn't think of that, but I'm gonna put that down, and that's a good idea.
Just thinking. All righty, thanks.
Yeah, that would be a good idea, maybe to just get a sense from them, especially if you're looking at teenage distracted driving, like what have they seen? You know, what's their experience with teens in the township? What are they, usually stopping teens for or not stopping them for?
And then I had another thought. Jenny, what is the nature of, maybe you don't have an answer to this, of student driving and parking on the high school campus? And is there anybody at the school board who might have an insight into issues of distracted student driving and student driving in general in the Radnor Township School District?
So are you asking me about the actual driving on the campus itself?
Yeah, anything anything or anybody that might have information that could help the students put together their program on distracted driving from the point of view of the school board.
I mean, I can definitely look into that through some of the people that work with our students at the high school level, some of our, counselors and, possibly our SAP coordinator, and see if there's anything there. I mean, if you're talking about the actual driving, like on the campus itself, as you may or may not know, our campus is undergoing a pretty large project right now. So, sometimes the traffic patterns change, so I'm sure it can be very, difficult. People trying to figure out which way they're supposed to go. Is it a one-way this time? Is it not? It's been getting better, but I know in the beginning of the school year, and even at the end of last year, it was more so pronounced. But we're looking for that to really start ending on our campus per se. But I could definitely put some people in touch with our young students here and see if there's something that they could work on with them.
Is there anybody in the administration who has responsibility for the parking facilities across the school district?
Well, across the school district parking facilities, yes, that would be probably Mr. Doolin and Vaughn, Vaughn Bryan. He's our Assistant Director of Buildings and Grounds. At the high school itself, as far as I can tell when I'm there, it seems like it's the assistant principal. It seems like Joe McNamara, it seems to be the most prominent one with that. But of course, Mrs. Kevgis, the principal, and the other assistant principals as well would be also a big part of making sure that the traffic patterns at the high school are working to the best ability and making sure that the students are parking where they're supposed to and, all of those things.
Great. Just to give you a dinosaur's perspective on this, when I graduated Lower Merion, boo, in 1969, there were 10 people in my senior class who had cars and nobody in the underclass. There were 10 student cars to be accounted for in going to school at Lower Merion in 1969.
It's a little different now.
It's a little different now.
Yeah, now they actually, there's a senior lottery, correct? And not all seniors can park on campus. One thought, Ray, may be to speak to security, because I know they're out there every morning helping direct traffic at the end of the day too. Just like, say who's there in the morning. I recognize them, you probably do as well. Just be like, have you, what's been your experience with the students? Because you're right, it seems like every other week there's a different traffic pattern. So like, that's a great example of where you can't be distracted, I'm sure we've all had the experience where we get in the car, drive somewhere, and don't really remember how we got there because it's so ingrained and there's not any changes. Whereas when you go into that school, things are constantly different.
Okay, so we'll expect to hear from you guys again next month. And I'm thrilled that you're putting together a timeline for your project. Sounds like great organizational skills, and if you could share your timeline with us, for example, at your next report, that'd be great. Okay, there was another issue on the intern program, and Alex had started to raise the notion that we could do significantly more in terms of formalizing a number of different aspects of it, including how we recruit, what we ask for people, for the students who want to take on the internships, our timelines, and how we select in our timelines. And so over the course of the coming months through the end of the school year, I'm hoping that we can, Alex has taken on putting out straw man suggestions so that we can really tighten the program up, and hopefully by the end of this school year, we'll have a more formalized set of criteria for who should be looking at this, how we select, how many, and how we choose topics. So I'm actually looking forward to that. I think it was a great idea on Alex's part. Any other comments on the intern program or the project? Good.
I had a comment about it. I think I spoke with Alex about this, and he let me know that this is an opportunity available for our seniors. Is that right?
We've made it available to, I think 2 years ago, sophomore, juniors, seniors, and then the past 2 years, juniors and seniors, but we've pretty much given seniority to the seniors.
Yeah. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's a rich program from what I've seen about it so far, but I was just thinking that it may be very valuable for people that are earlier in their high school career as a way to explore public health as a career, explore health as a career, and also differentiate themselves in their college applications for having done this. Whereas if someone is participating as a senior, it may be a little bit late in their journey, their pre-college, pre-graduation journey, to significantly impact their immediate post-graduation plans. So I was just, I'm sure that the program is beneficial no matter what, but I think that it would be an interesting thing to have it be biased towards the younger students who their course may be more malleable at the point at which they are participating.
I think you make a really good point. I think that's one of the things that we should absolutely come to a conclusion as a board, as part of our overhaul of the system. And I think that you make a really strong point. The other thing that was raised along those lines was, do we need to be wed to having only 2 interns? Could we have more? Because we always have, we're 8, 10. We will maybe have more applicants for 2 slots. And my feedback on that would be, there's a limitation. The limitation is I don't think we should have the program without providing effective mentorship for the program. And there's a bandwidth on mentorship for the program. So if we were going to take on more folks, I think we'd have to see our way to providing more mentorship. So I think those are the kinds of topics that we absolutely need to, I think we need to organize our thinking along all of those parameters and get a broad discussion around each of them and solidify.
I had one other thought, if it's okay, which is that it seems like the student work is a significant part of the work of this board. And from what I understand, the students get to choose the topic that they work on. I was thinking that it might be beneficial to everyone if the board decided the topic based on priorities that we see for our community. And, that way, I think it would just enhance the wins associated with the program if we did that.
I think that I've thought that for a while. Again, another one of the topics, I think that that's an important part in terms of putting together a more robust program. How do you assign that? How many people do you have? Who are they? How do you choose them? What do you ask for from them? And how do you assign the topic, I think, and then timelines are all the key parameters. So thanks. I think we should make sure to include that as part of our discussion and see
No
where we
worries, Ray, for you this year. But yeah, I think that would be an excellent idea too, if we have like a few specific topics that we would like to be investigated, we could kind of include that when we're looking for the interns. Like the Board of Health is searching for students to help us research, these things, because we may get specific, students who have interest in those specific areas.
Yes. It occurs to me that it also might facilitate us including more students. Because if the board set out at the beginning of the year a list of topics that we think are advantageous for us to be involved with, then each member of the board or certain members of the board could take a different project. It would be a way again, I think it would just really emphasize the wins and increase the wins for everyone. And it would be a way of promoting certain topics to be developed by the board through the year. And it would be a way of engaging individual board members in projects.
So I have to say that my thinking along those lines has been aligned with what you're saying for a while now. But to take the opposite side, just to bat it around, how could we provide a little more guidance from the board for what the township needs so that we are aligning the program with a perceived township need without losing the creativity that's brought from people feet on the ground in a different generation. And the reason I think of that now is that one of the best intern programs was an idea that I can't believe I'm blocking on her name, but the preparedness of facilities for ADA friendliness, and it wasn't so much that it was a novel idea, but she put the energy behind executing that was quite remarkable. So I think that I don't push back in that direction, except that we want to make sure we keep that balance, because there's nothing more important, I think, to getting a successful program than the buy-in and commitment of the interns who carry it out.
I totally agree with that, and I think that is just as valuable if we, as a board, decided ahead of time what the topics should be, and we had multiple slots available. We could ask applicants to choose the slot that they're interested in and apply for that slot. So that way we would have people who are interested in the topic. And I think we should always, I respect what you're saying about the creativity of the student, because I don't think we could ever be as creative as our students, most likely. And I think we should always honor their creativity, regardless of the topic. So just some of my thoughts.
So this is, I think this is the kind of discussion that I really want to encourage over the next couple of months. I think we'll, for my thinking, I'm going to need to put it into a matrix, and then I want to make sure that we bring in input from all the members of the board. But I think that the first point you made, that we spend a lot of time on this, and therefore it's worth the investment in the time, is absolutely true. And the suggestions you're making, I like them. I'm going to ask you to send me an email just just headline those so that I can organize it, because I'll take responsibility for doing the minutes, and I don't want to try and back into that. So if you'll send that to me, that'd be great.
I will do that. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else on this topic? Okay, with that, I'm going to ask Maggie to give us a Board of Commissioners update.
Sure. Well, we've been lot of budget and redistricting and ordinance updates, so that is not very relevant to this meeting. But we did have a very interesting presentation by the school district, actually, about the possibility of having outdoor cameras on the school buses. And I know Pennsylvania's been looking at some legislation about civil prosecution of people that blow by school buses that are flashing red and, do illegal things around school buses. And really formalizing that and tightening up. And it's sort of an interesting hand-in-hand thing that's going on. I think there was some good discussion. This was not a voting issue for us. It was our the first presentation from the school district to us. It's a third-party run camera system that's installed and maintained and taped is an old form, but monitored by the third party. But then infractions would have to be gone over by our police. So it would take police time, and there was a lot of discussion about that. There was a lot of discussion about more cameras, really, kind of thing. But I think that student safety won most people over in the end. So that's just a little summary of that. It was an interesting discussion. If anybody wants to go back and look at the YouTube video, it's fairly short, but it was fascinating.
That is fascinating. There's so many things I think about. I will tell you on the other side, I have always just believed that, like, the fickle finger of fate will explode your car if you go running through a flashing red light. But it's amazing how often I see people do. It's just one of those things. If a school bus's lights start flashing yellow, my foot is on my brake. But I'm astounded at how many people that is not the case for.
And the bus drivers report really high infraction rate.
Yeah, I'm sure. On the other
Another
side,
interesting topic potentially for us and a student to study in the future. So.
kind of at the intersection of that, though, is I often drive up Radnor Chester Road from Conestoga to Lancaster, which is one of the main highways for accessing Radnor High School. And I can't tell you how much bad behavior I see from Radnor High School drivers on that road. Really bad driving behavior. So that might fold into the student intern. I'm talking about people crossing over the double yellow line on the 2 line, shooting out from the Ivan Avenue on without looking in either direction, pulling into the left lane and blasting by people into a lane where there's a line of cars. So less distracted driving than anxious driving in the morning at that intersection. I don't know why I felt compelled to say that, but I did. I just think that if we're going to, I think paying attention to road safety related to transportation to school in the township is as huge a health item as you can take up. I think that the school bus issue is one, and I know that people get angry because there's nothing that ties up our traffic more than the school buses. It just does. And you know what? It's the price you pay for having safe kids safely going to safe schools. But it does get people really, really whipped up. So I think that it's an important community topic. Thanks. Anything else out of this, the Board of Commissioners?
No, nothing else came to mind when I re-looked over the agenda. That seemed to be the really
I have a question about it that has less to do with Board of Health than as a Radnor Township citizen, and having read the minutes of the board meeting. Was there really a concern that there was inadequate transparency on the process of filling the empty seat vacated by our dear Lisa, who, congratulations to her, will now be sitting in Harrisburg serving our community? I found that somewhat astounding. I had no problem.
Well, there was a commissioner that felt that it was a rushed process. Only one person put themselves forward, and I think that looked particularly rushed because there was no reason to, the person was qualified and no reason to put it off too much more and wait another week, just get them up there. Yes, there was only one commissioner had
So,
that.
so
view.
my question there is, to call it right, wasn't the timeline defined by the date of the election, the time that Lisa needs to be seated in Harrisburg and therefore vacate her seat here, and the time of the special election so it was rushed by the calendar,
It seemed so
not.
to me, yes.
And then, so if it's a transparency issue, the question is, well, what, I raised this going back to our own election, what would constitute appropriate transparency? What would need to be done?
Well, I think the thought is that the name of the prospective Ward 4 candidate, if you will, it's not really, you know what I mean, should have been in the public domain for at least a week prior to the meeting. However, know that someone could have come to that meeting and put themselves forward. Yeah, so it didn't really mesh, in my mind. I thought it was fine, so.
And by the time we meet again, we'll be talking about a special election. When's the special election?
Is it May?
May, so it'll be at the primary, will be a commissioner, Ward 4 commissioner, full election, yeah.
Thank you, and pardon me, colleagues, for diverting. So, Jenny, a school district update, if you have one to provide, is the last new business item on the agenda.
I really don't have anything, except I just feel like we have been very lucky at Radnor, and we've been able to continue, although we've had illnesses, if we're talking about all the different things that are going on, you know, staff members have been out, students have been out, we've been able to maintain and keep everything open, and our classes have been covered, and, you know, like I'm just gonna look here, like knock on wood, we're, you know, moving forward. We also are not doing, I saw on the news that Philadelphia schools are saying they're coming back and they're going to mask for the 2 weeks coming back. That's not something we're doing. So it's just kind of status quo. We're moving forward. But there was, I should say, an uptick in some of the different illnesses we saw, but it does seem to have leveled out. And we seem to be doing pretty well in our district at this point, albeit it's a pretty, you know, busy season right now, comparatively speaking.
Was there discussion about the possibility of asking folks to mask for some period of time when they return from a holiday season where a lot of people will be traveling? There will be a significant amount of exposure. Was that discussed?
Not in any meeting I was in, no. I think basically because of the ability that we've been able to continue to maintain, there are, and always will be, just as sitting here looking, different reasons that people do mask, students and staff. And we see that throughout on ongoing basis. You know, many people I know that were traveling, they knew that they were going to be on airplanes. They wanted to make sure that they stayed well because they're going a far distance, and they were masking prior to their trip just to play that piece safe. And a lot of people, when they do come back, sometimes they will continue to mask because it just makes them feel better. And, you know, I don't want to say you don't notice it because you notice it, but it's not something that is anything that anyone talks about. People are just taking care of themselves in the best way possible. And that's students and paraprofessionals and our teachers and administrators.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like it's become less unusual for students just to be wearing a mask for a few days, you know. My daughter, like, she wasn't sick, but she had a sore throat. She's like, I'll just wear a mask today just to make sure in case it's turning into something. And it seems like that's pretty common among the students.
I agree. I see that a lot, and I even see that in my office. People will come in and they'll have a mask, and, you know, they didn't the day before, and we don't really say anything, but you just kind of go like, you know, and they'll say, oh, I'm just getting a little bit of a scratchy throat, or I just wasn't feeling real well, and I just want to make sure, even more than for themselves, for the other people in the office, which is very appreciated by the people in the office, especially, I mean, anytime, but as we get close to the holidays, we all want to be well.
So between mandating masks and having no overt policy, is it possible that there's an even better middle ground? And I raise this because there has been so much political and social stigma around one way or the other, wearing or not wearing masks, that it's not a neutral ground. And we're asking people to make decisions in a setting where peer pressure is immense. So would it be valuable for us to make it clear that our current policy is asking people to exercise a degree of personal and social responsibility, and that people should make those decisions with their own health and the health of their colleagues around, and encourage what sounds like you believe is good behavior, but which might have a stigma or peer pressure attached? Because we're not in a plain, neutral, undisturbed environment. There's a lot of background and a lot of negativity in that discussion, and I just wonder whether mandates are done, absolutely done. I don't believe that we should mandate, but it did strike me when I heard on the news that Philadelphia was taking that policy, that they probably will be helping the health of their school population by doing that. Now, they have a different setting, different problem, and I certainly don't believe that we should be recommending any mandates, but we certainly could make it clear to people that there should be no stigma attached, that choosing to wear a mask is an excellent decision, like you choose to brush your teeth, right? There's no stigma attached to it, but you choose to brush your teeth. And so I wonder whether there's not a cultural phenomenon that could be addressed there.
I have to tell you, from what I've seen, it seems like the students are a lot more flexible and fluid in their thinking, because, they're younger and they kind of came into this, and this may be more of a norm for them. It's very different, for, to say myself, like being 58, and this is like the first time I ever went through anything like this. It's striking, but our students are much more flexible thinkers than many of the adults are. But I have to say, even the people that are getting, if you do get sick, I think a long time ago it was like you just came back as soon as you could. And sometimes you came back and you were still not quite there. People are taking longer times being out and fully getting over the different things that they have, whatever they be. And I really think it's made us, even in this time of having all of these three really huge things going on with the flu and the respiratory and COVID, I think it's making us even more well to understand all of the different things that we need to do to keep ourselves safe, but also in thinking a lot more of the people around us. And that's what I've seen even in my office. I noticed that I've worked there since 2014, and I'll say myself, I got very, very sick it was about a week and a half ago. And typically I would have probably stayed out for those days until my fever broke, and then I would have come in. This time I stayed out until I felt almost 100%, like I was feeling really good. And I came back, went into my office, closed the door, and just said, I'm in here, you stand at the doorway. And that's what I did for the first day or two back. And that's something that probably would not have happened 5 or 6 years ago. I'm not going to say probably. It wouldn't have happened 5 or 6 years ago. So, I think everyone's feeling that way, and I think it is making a really big difference in Radnor and being able to keep ourselves open and running as smoothly as we are.
So you raised some really great issues. So, yeah, when I was coming up, you went to school no matter what, came back to school as soon as you could, you went to work no matter what, came back to school whenever you could. And that behavior served us okay for decades when most people weren't dying of the respiratory diseases that were afoot. So that's number one. Number two, you raised the point how can we encourage not only those behaviors, how can we make those behaviors standard, and also encourage the other behaviors? Certainly, by the time when they get into high school, kids can know that washing your hands and avoiding touching your faces, and is there any need to encourage those kind of behaviors? Because I'm pretty certain that we have entered a new age. COVID's going to be endemicized. It's no longer going to be the COVID pandemic, but population densities, travel patterns, driving, and moving around virtually dictate that we are going to be susceptible to transmissible viruses by respiratory and fomite means. And the viruses have kind of caught up to our social behaviors. And this winter, to me, is actually the scarier of the winters. We're not living in a world where, like the flu pandemic of 2018, the flu pandemic came on, a lot of people got sick, a lot of people died, it went away, we got vaccines, hooray. That's not what's happening here. We're actually watching the endemicization of a novel virus at the same time as other viruses are starting to behave in ways that we haven't seen before. So programming into our behaviors as a community means of avoiding transmission of viruses, especially at times of highest transmission, just on a behavioral basis. What can we do to be good citizens, to protect our own health and the health of our neighbors and our community? And I wonder whether we might not need to pay some attention to that as we move forward.
So I will just put one thing in, as you were saying that, the one thing that I was going to say, and I just lost track a little bit. One of the things that COVID brought about was our ability to be virtual. And being virtual in work, and as a student, having the ability to go on the different platforms that we have, so you don't get yourself so behind at work, because there comes a point where you aren't in bed, flat out, but you might still be contagious, but you are more than capable of being virtually on Zooms and, on the computer, and things are, everything is digital, and it makes doing your job a lot easier, and you don't get as far behind, so you don't have that mentality like you have to come back because of all these things. And I think it helps our students as well. They have the ability to go on to the platforms, and I'm not as versed in them as I'm sure our student here is, but Schoology and parents being able to go in. We call it the HAC, which is the Home Access Center, where parents can go in and see what is coming up for their student if they are not doing well. And we don't want to put too much pressure, because we also want to say, if you're sick, be sick. Don't always be thinking about the work, but there does come a point where maybe this allows people to more slowly get back into the swing of things without feeling like they've, fallen so far behind. So, COVID was COVID, but it really did assist us in a lot of ways, and it forced us to do it really quickly. I think we were always going in that direction, but when everything shut down in March of 2020, we had to move quick, and we did. And sometimes good things can come out of that, and I would say that was the one thing that came out. It really made us think, and be very creative in how we were able to help our students and help our staff continue to be productive, even if they weren't able to be present.
So Jenny, they're going to continue indefinitely, the dual virtual and in school?
So we do have programming. We
Okay,
have
good.
what we call, it's called RAC. So it's the Radnor. It's like a cyber thing that some of our students can do if they want to. But what we do have for all of our students, when they're present, all of the teachers put their assignments up on something called Schoology. And a lot of different assignments, if not almost all of them, can be submitted digitally. So it's not like you're handing in papers. Like it's hard for my brain to go completely around all of this, but this is how the students are interacting, and everybody has their device. And this is how they utilize it, even when they're in school, feeling well. This is still how they're submitting a lot of their work and so forth. And Ray, I'm right? Ray? Am I correct? Like, you guys are digitally submitting most of the work that you have in school through your computers and Schoology and the OneNotes and all of that, am I correct?
Outside of like language arts class, I'd say even most math teachers, even most math teachers that are like typically like seen as like the traditional type of teachers, even like some of them are transitioning into like OneNote uploads or like Schoology uploads. So mostly like only LA teachers accept paper at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Well, that
it's,
keeps them safe then, okay.
yeah, it's a
Good.
completely different way of looking at it, but we always do want to maintain that if a student is sick, sometimes, we need them to take that time. It's not there so that they do everything. You're allowed to just be in bed and be sick, especially with some of these illnesses. So it's important to put that up there, and that does help, I think, our communities to maintain the distance at certain times that is assisting everyone to stay better. So that's just another piece of it.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny. Maggie? I'm sorry, I have to run. Help yourself to a cupcake or two to take home with you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that, and happy holidays to all.
Merry Christmas.
You too.
And thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
help. So with that, if I can have I think those comments you make, Jenny, are great, that it has been transformative. But I think that we should keep an eye on it, because having that hybrid is so powerful now. I think that we all learned that 4-year-olds wearing masks all the time was not good for social development of 4-year-olds, and kids not having social contact was not good. But on the other hand, hundreds of pediatric deaths from influenza is also not good, and that's why I make the comment about, we're calling it a triple-demic this year. I just think that year on year, we're going to see more transmission of more virulent viral illnesses. It just looks like that's what's happening. And we were all worried about antibiotic resistance for bacterial diseases, but while we were worrying about that, the viruses have kind of snuck up on us and bit us a little bit. So I think this is something that we should just keep an eye on. So thanks for those comments. They're great. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I can motion to adjourn.
The meeting is adjourned.